We want to bring in independent Senator Angus King of Maine. He is a member of the Intelligence and Armed Services Committees, and he is joining us now live. Senator King, I appreciate your time. Right off the bat, I want to ask you a simple question, which is, do you believe the president needs a war authorization vote to broaden strikes in Iraq or to begin them in Syria?
It depends entirely on what his real plan is. I think if he goes into Syria, that's a different story. A lot depends on what the duration, what the plans are, whether they go beyond airstrikes. I think we have to hear from the president starting this afternoon with the leadership and tomorrow night when he talks to the country. But I think Congress does have a role, and I suspect the president is not going to ask anything of Congress, but that still leaves the question of whether we ourselves should be debating this. I'm not comfortable with Congress simply sitting back and criticizing and second-guessing. I think we have a responsibility here, particularly if the president is proposing a wider array of use of force than what has been done so far.
So let's get a sense of where you stand as a member of Congress. Do you support strikes in Syria? And perhaps more broadly, what should the American mission there be?
Well, that's you put the second part that you said is most important. We have to define the mission. That's one of the things I want to hear from the president is, what is the mission? What's the goal? What's the vital national interest that's at stake?
What would satisfy you? What do you want to hear? What do you believe would make it worthy of strikes in Syria?
I think strikes in Syria, if the mission is to degrade ISIS, I think you have to go to Syria. That's where their headquarters is. They're ignoring that border between Syria and Iraq, and I'm not sure that we should pay a special attention to it if that's where the headquarters and the head of the snake is. On the other hand, if we're talking about a broader kind of, I've heard rumors of a 3-year campaign. It should not, I don't believe, involve combat troops. We learned in Iraq that really doesn't work. It has to be a coalition. It has to be an inclusive government in Baghdad that can gain the confidence of the Sunni population where ISIS is located. If that doesn't happen, nothing else is going to work.
You've said before that you doubt that the U.S. can, quote unquote, win against ISIS. So I want to get a sense from you. Are you concerned about what would fill the void in Syria? If there were to be a short-term campaign in Iraq and in Syria, who fills that void? What happens when the U.S. ultimately leaves?
Well, ultimately, you know, this is a Middle Eastern war involving interests and historical differences that go back hundreds, if not over 1,000 years. And those people ultimately have to make these decisions. I mean, that's one of the big lessons of Iraq is that you need to have the local people making these decisions and engaged in this struggle. I think one of the most important things is what happened yesterday with the new government in Baghdad. The question is, it sounds good, but they didn't do interior and defense. Those are the most important positions. And if the regime in Baghdad is viewed as simply Shia that excludes Kurds and Sunnis, then I think it's going to be practically impossible to dislodge ISIS from Mosul and northern Iraq and eastern Syria.
And Senator King, then very quickly, finally, did the administration drag its feet? Did they wait too long before taking any potential action in Syria? Already our reports from people that are along the Turkish-Syrian border is that the Free Syrian Army, the moderate rebel groups, have been decimated. There is no opposition group presently there because we've waited so long.
Well, again, it's pretty easy to second guess on that situation. I can tell you from having looked at and worked on the Syrian issue almost since arriving here in the Congress 2 years ago, it's one of the most complicated and difficult to assess. There were 1,200 opposition groups at one point last year. So I think criticizing the administration for not acting sooner is pretty good 2020 hindsight. But at the time, I think a prudent course of arming the rebels that we could vet and assure weren't going to operate against our interests. But even then, I understand some of the weapons that we've supplied have fallen into the hands of ISIS. A very difficult situation, but I think now the president needs to tell us exactly what he wants to achieve and how he's going to do it and build that international coalition.
We'll wait to hear from the president tomorrow. Senator Angus King, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.